Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Chris George Zuger, and you have entered the Den of Lore. Pull your chair up to the fire and grab your glasses of scotch, because we're going to learn some cool shit tonight, courtesy of Dr. Bryan Keating, author of one of the top nonfiction books on Amazon.com, Losing the Nobel Prize. And actually, I'll let you know a little bit of a secret. This is actually a pre-record. The night that we were supposed to do this show, I had pretty well every single piece of equipment I had in the studio go almost up in flames. My preamp went completely to shit. Can't even use that. I guess we can bleep that out. Bram, bleep that one out.
I'll bleep that one.
Thank you very much. Go almost up in flames. My preamp went completely to yeah, no, I lost a lot of my equipment, and we had just recently updated the studio at the time, and yeah, basically I had to go and pull a bunch of equipment out of a closet to get the actual interview going. What was supposed to be 2 hours, I think we got down to about 45 minutes or to an hour or so, and then also we have none other than Bernie Taylor, a good friend of the show, who joined us in afterwards to continue the show with an extra addendum, or addendum. Thank you guys. Talk on the cosmic egg, which is kind of just one of those interesting theories in philosophy with regards to the Big Bang. And, you know, Bryan Keating is actually one of the top astrophysicists on the planet, so I felt absolutely horrible with regards to this particular interview, considering it was supposed to be, and is, one of our biggest shows ever. And I'm very glad and very proud to be able to present this to you, thanking Bram for the edit, and for Denver for being a very cool chap in between recording to lend his big, sexy voice to the intro. Now, Bryan is a professor of physics at the Center of Astrophysics and Space Sciences in the Department of Physics at the University of California in San Diego. He is a public speaker, inventor, and an expert in the study of the universe's oldest light, the cosmic microwave background, which is being used to learn about the origins and evolution of the universe, which I think is actually quite cool. And, you know, we talk a lot about ancient history on this show. You can't really get much more ancient history than the beginning of time. And Dr. Keating is a pioneer in the search for the earliest physical evidence of the inflationary epoch, which is that era right after the Big Bang, when the universe was expanding very rapidly. The theorized period of expansion in space in the early universe directly after the Big Bang. Physicists predict that this evidence will reveal itself as a particular pattern in the way the CMB light is polarized, and this pattern is referred to as a B-mode pattern. And this book is actually with regards to not necessarily the findings, but the story of one of the most groundbreaking discoveries in astrophysics and physics in the last 150 years. And at one point, there was a lot of clamor with regards to Mr. Keating's winning a Nobel Prize. And, well, obviously, if the book is called Losing the Nobel Prize, it's unfortunate to say he did not get it, but the reason of why is a story of heartache and triumph and self-discovery and a heck of a lot of love. And I'm honestly... I'm in love with the book. I read it in about 2-3 days after I got it in the mail. It honestly changed my mind as far as what the significance of the Nobel Prize is, what it holds to scientists, and how that kind of equates to very large pinnacle prizes in other fields. And it gave me a really good perspective on what's really important. And you know, I'm very proud, no matter what happened with the preparation for this interview, to have the pleasure and the honor to have had this interview with Dr. Keating. And I do honestly hope that you all enjoy it. And just in case, if the edit does not actually have it, I did want to thank our patrons who ensure that this show can stay 100% sponsor-free, corporate control-free, and allows us to say pretty well whatever the bleep we want on air, and allows us to be able to bring controversial figures or figures of great note and talk about pretty well anything that they're interested in talking about. And that would not be possible without our patrons who ensure that the lights can stay on, the internet can stay on, our web servers are paid for, the programs that help us broadcast the show weekly are taken care of, and ensure that overall the show just continues on. And I want to thank especially our illustrious masters, Jackie from across the pond and Pat from Brooklyn, and to our masters, Jenny, Dobromir, Lee, Chuck, Jared, Mrs. Fox, Joshua, Mark, and Ellen, as well as to our patrons, Katie, Audrey, Mike, Eclipse, Eric, Martin, Photopic, Nick, Corey, Charles, Thiago, Michael, Dean John, Anthony, Atlantic Koosh, Venice, Christopher, Robin, and Hobby, courtesy of denoflore.com's PayPal button. If you want to support independent radio and broadcast, including this show, and especially this show, go to patreon.com/denoflore, or go to denoflore.com and hit the donate button or become a PayPal.
And make sure that you give yourself a name that's really cool, like Atlantic Kush.
Thank you, Bram. I thought so as well. And, ensure that we can stay on the air. We're reaching our 100th episode, which will be coming up in the middle of June. We have a very special show coming up for that one. And we want to make sure we can go for another 100 or 200 or 1,000. So if you like the show, you like what we do, support us and enjoy this episode with Dr. Bryan Keating. I think we are back and live. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining in, you missed me tearing apart about 3 different mixers with about 15 different hookups with Dr. Keating here looking at the ceiling from my phone. And I'm fairly certain that I probably taught you a few Croatian swear words. And
so I think things are in good shape now. I've moved on to other projects, still, tangentially involved with Bicep, but the day-to-day leadership and participation that I'm involved with, that project is an enormous collaboration of 200 plus scientists from every continent in the world, and including Antarctica. And this project will be building an array of telescopes of enormous size in the Atacama Desert of northern Chile. And its same, kind of scientific goals are to study the universe's origin, how the universe evolved, and what the universe is made of. And that's going to take place beginning observations in about 18 months and then lasting for hopefully about a decade.
Now, for this, you're speaking of the array telescopes that would, let's say, if you've got one in North America, one in Africa, one in Australia, it's as large as the surface area between them.
No, it's not that. That's called interferometry.
Okay.
No, this is a normal camera, like an imaging camera, like your point-and-shoot DSLR, except it works with microwaves, so it detects heat from the Big Bang instead of visible light from, your kid's face.
Now, for most people out there, knowing cool, or as we say here, cool shit is pretty cool.
Yeah.
What would be the importance or significance of being able to image and understand that era a little better?
Well, you'd be able to really understand the origin of everything. So if you think about, if you see a little baby and you want to know what that baby is going to look like in the future, there's some software you can use to kind of deconstruct it, but it doesn't really play out to be super accurate. So instead, with the early universe is simple in one sense, that the properties and constituents are well known and well understood, how the forces and matter interact. So if you can measure the earliest parts of the universe, you could then predict what the universe would look like deep into the future. And that's what we're trying to do with these new telescopes.
What are some of the obstacles, especially with what you've gone through? Knowing that you've, for this graven idol, and I know you've mentioned that in one of your interviews. You've basically spat on it and kind of thrown it to the dogs, as it were, and said, "Okay, well, have what you will," and kind of made it, not necessarily made it lose its luster, but you allowed people to peer behind the veil, to take away some of the mystique. How much pushback are you getting with these new programs, knowing that you've done this, knowing that you may have people who, well, may curse your name on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, I think you have to take a stand, and for me, the taking of the stand came down to I'd been confronted with this idol, with this demigod like status of Alfred Nobel and these prizes, and I began to wonder, why is it so, and why does society venerate this prize? Is given out by 500 white Swedish guys every year, and they give it out predominantly to their people that are connected or have power, and it really distorts the playing field. I did an event, a book signing last night, and somebody asked, well, isn't it great that competition is engendered by the Nobel Prize? And I said, it can be good, but it can also be very unfair, because the rich get richer, and the more funding you have, and the more Nobel Prizes are on your staff, and the more teammates that you can promote in that way, the more money, the more research, the more time, the more funding, everything comes to you. So the playing field becomes very unfair, and ultimately the Nobel Prize is essentially a monopoly. There are prizes worth 3 times as much money as the Nobel Prize that are given to physicists and astronomers. And there's many of them. There's like 2 or 3 that are worth twice or 3 times as much. You only get, only in quotes, but only get if you win the whole Nobel Prize by yourself. And nobody has done that in 25 years. But if you do, and you don't share it with 2 other people, you get $1 million before taxes. And then you come back to America, you get $500,000 because you get taxes taken out in every which way but loose. And then so you're left with $500,000, and that's not chump change, but you can't really do that would pay for about a graduate student and a postdoc working in your lab for 5 years. So I mean, it's nice, but it's not extraordinary in terms of what's required to do big scientific projects. But these same people that win it, they'll say things like, well, I wouldn't, or people that win a prize that's worth 10 times as much as that will say, well, I would trade that in a second for a Nobel Prize. I think that speaks to the illustrious, idolatrous nature of the Nobel Prize. And so, yeah, I think that there will be people that will be upset about it, because it's an industry that's very powerful one in Sweden and Norway, and they take these things very seriously. And they don't like to change until they have like a sex scandal, which is now breaking in the Nobel Prize in Literature, causing the King of Sweden to get involved, because it's so prestigious and so important and existential threat to the nation's identity. So I don't expect them to react well. I have had conversations with members of the Swedish Royal Academy that choose the Nobel Prize, and they say they agree with me, confidentially. And I have had Nobel Prize winners read the book, and I haven't heard complaints from them. So, I think people agree with it, and I don't think there'll be, much public kind of disagreement that people will say sour grapes and sore loser, and I'm used to hearing that. But, if the criterion to criticize something is that you have to have won it, then nobody should criticize Donald Trump, who hasn't been president.
Well, if you've ever watched this show, at least when we don't have any technical difficulties, you know that we've done shows on Donald Trump, and there's winning and then there's cheating to win. And you can't necessarily say he won, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, you've had 45 other people who've won it before. More people have won the Nobel Prize. Still, less people than I think have been Pope. It's not as good as the new hotness.
You can't win it posthumously. So the duration over which it did it in an ultra opaque ceremony and process that I was a part of, because I nominated the winners of the 2016 Nobel Prize. Just randomly, they asked me to nominate the winners for 2016. And if you make it through to all that, and you have a lot of luck and perseverance and good health, then when you're 27, 28, 30 years old, that means you have to live to at least be 70. And most people don't do the Nobel work until they're 40, which means the average age of Nobel, just a few months after he would have been eligible to win the Nobel Prize, and instead his rightful share went to a third person. So it's very capricious. And so it's not, that in itself shows you that it's not a scientific process. If a discovery is great and a person dies the day before the award is given, they won't get it. That's not scientific.
Well, you also have to look at it, from the philosophical standpoint. It's like, if you're dead, what are you going to do with 150 or hundreds. My math is a little bit off.
Yeah, well, yeah, or half
But
a million dollars,
yeah,
well, that's true, but then imagine, what they say when they win it, and how their kids feel about it, and their kids, the parents were away, the father was away. I mean, it's mostly men who win it, because no woman has won it in 54 years, and nobody understands exactly why that is, but some have suspicions about it. But let their family get some of the accolade that their father, their brother, their husband earned, or their hopefully their wife, their sister, their mother. And I think that's it's not correct to assume that there's no harm from doing that, because actually the Nobel Prize coronates physics royalty forever, and it also enshrouds the scientific discoveries in the canon of scientific history. So we teach science, and we'll point out when a given experiment won the Nobel Prize in the given field. And that's a very common way of certifying science and accomplishments by these accolades that are won. And so if the person dies, their name is written out of history. That's not fair.
Speaking of family, obviously you're a family man. You're married. You've got kids. You've recently welcomed a new one into the world, or two actually, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. On a very auspicious day. It was April 15th.
That's my birthday, actually. It's a good day.
Oh, I know it is.
So
tax day in America.
Well, yeah. They will be fine. Probably just a tad annoying, maybe a little bit egotistical, and have a very good taste for Scotch. But don't worry, just go with it. I'm a new father myself. I have a daughter. She's almost 5 months old at this point. Oh my goodness, I'm so tired. It's my first one, and like reading this book and from the message you've been sending, there's honestly a lot of inspiration. Like this is something that I actually want my daughter to read when she's growing up, to be able to kind of understand the inner workings of the world and how things work, and know that, like, yeah, there's people out there who like to be able to keep things for themselves. It shouldn't stop you from reaching for it and actually trying to change something.
That's right.
Which is essentially what you're trying to do. You're trying to light that spark of inspiration for positive change for the community and the world as a whole.
That's right.
Now, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So in my daughters, I have two daughters now, and in their room they have a portrait of Maria Mayer, who is the last female winner of the Nobel Prize in Physics. And I didn't put up, Shania Twain or whoever the music star is over there, and I didn't put up Venus Williams or some great athlete. I wanted to put up a figure of intellectual merit that was unrivaled in terms of her accomplishments. But even Maria Mayer said that winning the prize wasn't as fun nearly as doing the work that led to it.
There was some guy who, I'm trying to remember exactly who it was, but like, life is struggle, and it's not the pursuit of happiness, but it's the constantly trying to improve yourself so that you can, like, you're happy in the actual doing, not in the actual accomplishment.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Because it's during that journey that people grow. That's where the discovery of, many things happens about yourself, about the subject matter, and for yourself, considering the sheer amount of trials and tribulations that you've experienced during this writing process. Mm-hmm. How have you changed as an individual? What's your hero's journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the journey has been to recognize that these gilded accolades, these idols, these pinnacles of success should not define me. And actually, it's the hero's journey that matters, not the gilded destination of Stockholm, Sweden. And I think that's come into really crystalline relief and really demonstrate to me what matters in science and what also matters outside of science. And it's the relationships, the connections, the bonds that are made between people that are most important, both inside and outside of the lab.
And how was the relationship with, like, let's say, your students or your immediate colleagues changed? Have they seen you in a different light?
Well, I mean, the book, thankfully, has been extremely well received. It's gotten the reviews as one of the top 10 best books of the month on Amazon out of, tens of thousands that come out each month. And it was also selected as one of the 6 best books of the season by Nature magazine, which is arguably one of the most prestigious magazines in all of science. Got fantastic reviews in Science and in Science News, and just very thrilled overall to the reception for my writing. And I think the clarity of the presentation that I'm being told that I've provided is really is really speaking volumes to people. And so that's what every author wants, is to have people read it. Of course, I trade 100 readers today for one reader 100 years from now, and I hope the themes and the lessons of the book won't just be taken away. Oh, the Nobel Prize is bad, or oh, cosmology is so confusing, or whatever. But that really it's the kind of stoic approach to handling setbacks, adversity, etc. I say the book is written for anyone who didn't win a Nobel Prize, but it's also written for anyone who didn't win an Oscar or a high school senior class presidency, because you have to be comfortable with who you are and not define yourself by how external, arbitrary, capricious rules and committees deem your worthiness. And in my early career, I'm not ashamed to say I did succumb to that fallacy, but never again. And I do feel like I'm going to communicate that message both to my biological children, but also to my ideological children, those that are getting their degrees in my laboratory.
And like understanding that idea, those trappings, and like I grew up in the advertising world. If you can call it a science, it's more of an art. I just like to make pretty pictures and get paid for it.
Yeah.
Whenever we went through college, we always had the aspiration to be like Don Draper, where you have the corner office and like the bar at work, which you can still do. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. And then at some point you kind of become bitter and jaded.
All right.
And to a certain extent, you realize that it's whatever it's portrayed in media and whatever it's been put on this pedestal to be isn't actually it. And then you realize you don't want that anymore. And that discovery, can either break people or it can challenge them to be better. And for you, you've written this, this work which has been probably more well received than any science / memoir I think I've ever seen. I think it was also in Astronomy magazine, which is an amazing publication. Like, are you afraid? And this is more of a personal question, not necessarily, but still ties into the main. Like, are you afraid that the idea or the trappings of the success from the book may still lead you to that? To that same itch, or are you somebody who sticks to
That's a very good point, Chris. Yeah, I mean, one of my friends who's she's kind of the social media maven that I know, and she's been keeping track and posting all my stuff on Twitter because I don't have the time for it, and she's just such a wonderful person. But she said, with like all these accolades coming in from Nature, Science News, and Forbes everywhere, she's like, you're going to have to add another accolade to your title, best-selling author. And I said, and that's exactly what you're asking. And I think, I said to her, what, that's, nice of you to say, but I think that's another idol. I think that literally would be, so hypocritical for me to say, I just want to be a best-selling author and have that on my, if that was all it was about, I look back at, an author like me who got a tiny advance, from their publisher, but it really wasn't about the money. It was about, kind of taking on the sacred cow and telling the story that's so fascinating about how we came to understand our place in the universe and how we succumb to the same kind of biases and forces that even made people like Galileo make mistakes. So I want that to be the takeaway, not oh, this is how it performed, or this is the metrics for success don't lie in sales pitches or awards or even the Nobel Prize.
Have you considered either public speaking or motivational speaking? Because I know that it's a very big industry, and you do have a very good basis for at least being able to teach people. And best way to put it is you're a walking, talking demonstration of how to be able to overcome adversity and grow from it in a positive light and not just kind of wither away and let setbacks, end them, as it were.
Yeah, that's very kind of you to say. I think I'll be interested to see how the public, does integrate the messages that I'm providing in the book. It's not every day that people like to have cosmologists come and give a talk to a bunch of people in a self-help forum or webinar. I'm certainly open to it. I think personal growth is one of the most challenging but important things that people can do, and not a lot of I always forget if I'm right brain or left brain. I don't know. I don't remember which one is which, but a lot of the technical ones, not the artistic, spiritual ones, I think they are not in touch with their the greatness of their personal character, but also some of their weaknesses and foibles. And so if I could speak to people like that and kind of encourage them along the path to acceptance of their limitations, but also kind of striving for the proper accomplishments and dealing with adversity, as you say, that would be a great accomplishment. I've given one of these TEDx talks before, and I have a video on YouTube now. This online university called Prager University that's got 1 million hits in 3 days. So I'm very interested. Yeah, I'm very interested in reaching and communicating to the public the ideas that I've been bouncing around my brain for the last 20 years or so.
And if you're looking at the next 20 years, where do you see the it's like what it's like asking, so what do you think they're going to discover in 20 years? Like, are we going to be able to move through dimensions or what? Like, try not to answer
there's a lot that's happening in physics. It's exponentially growing, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen in 5 years, let alone 20 years. I would say we're going to understand and map out and explore the universe, the solar system, much more than we can comprehend right now. I hope that people don't fall into the trap of, kind of accepting science only if it leads to technology. I think there's a virtue in pure science just for its own purpose, without regard to, whether or not it can produce a better phone or a microwave oven or sound mixer.
It's about learning some cool shit.
Yeah, exactly.
My favorite thing is, either listening to like just science podcasts or lectures. I've listened to a few of yours before. Dealing with astrophysics can be a very daunting subject. People will think that it's astronomy, astrology, and a little bit of physics mixed in there because it has that word.
Right.
There is the standard definition. To you, what is it that you do? Like, how do you see your work in the most abstract, high-minded way possible?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to do is to illustrate how we build the instruments that come to give us the interpretations that we now have about the universe. So in other words, what are the tools that astronomers use from the time of Galileo? It's really the first person to use a tool to study the heavens, and how those advances in technology, in computation, and then allied with theoretical progress, how that can really take us to the promised land of really going back as far as we can in time, and hopefully someday answering the question that I would like to ask, God or Mother Nature, which is what happened 15 minutes before the Big Bang. I don't think that question is really understood right now. I think it is a well-posed question, despite what the late, great Stephen Hawking said. And I think that there's a chance we can understand what did happen for really the first time in human history. And I think that's makes it an exciting time to be alive.
I'm a very big, not even very big proponent. I believe that most likely that we're probably a 3D hologram on the surface of a 4D black hole. That's kind of my standpoint. And we're 15 minutes ago, I think we were just like belched out into this universe from, wherever we came from. I could be way wrong, but it seems the most logical with the limited amount of training that I have. What's your take on it? What's kind of your crazy? I
think that there's alternatives to the inflationary model that posit that there was not indeed just nothingness before the Big Bang, but instead there was another universe that existed before that collapsed upon itself, and that the fiery death throes of that universe provided the raw materials, the iron and the coke and everything else that was needed to produce the universe that we inhabit today. And there's some compelling reasons to think that might be true, and the tools and technology that we're working on may indeed answer that question, in my professional lifetime. And I'm working to be, leading the team that will accomplish that.
And with your new experiments and works that are going to be coming up in the next couple of years, how can people learn more about it?
So we've constructed a telescope called the Simons Observatory, or we've constructed a collaboration called Simons Observatory, and you can go to simonsobservatory.org in order to follow what we're doing there. My own personal work is at my website, bryankeating.com. And we've also set up a community called losingthenobelprize.org for people to advocate for change and reformation of the Nobel Prize so that it can someday represent the noble institution I think that Alfred Nobel desired for the benefit of all mankind.
And I like that. I don't know that everyone else out there will like that.
Yeah.
And I know that you've been extremely patient with our technical difficulties. You have to overcome adversity, and we still did make it happen.
That's right.
I will edit this down, and I'll make sure you've got a nice, succinct 20, 30-minute interview from this. And I know everything you say, at least to me, is gold, because we have had very few actual scientists on the show.
No, I know.
And you would be the first astrophysicist we've had, and for my own personal views, it's like, this is cool. Okay.
Yeah, and mine too. I very much enjoyed talking with you, Chris, and going to continue to support you, and look forward to maybe another interview someday as well.
Let me iron out the new preamp and the compressor and because the connections are the same. It's just things happen, and you just have to roll with the punches, as it were.
Absolutely.
Now I'm going to let you go. I know you've got a long night ahead of you, and I'd like to thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Great talking to you. Have a wonderful night.
You as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. We're live. And you're probably wondering what the heck has been going on the last little while. Well, I can tell you. We have a dedication to try and improve the show. And there has been some major investments in, some equipment that are supposed to be able to bring us more of a professional sound. And unfortunately, it seems that all of the last 30 hours of non-stop work that I've put into the new studio and testing and apparently did not work. So now I'm actually just back onto the old mixer. I'm actually recording essentially the same way we did when we first started the show, so there you go. And what better person to be able to kind of invite back on is the second part of our little program. One of our favorite and biggest guests, and a good friend of the show, and somebody that I just love talking to because he's awesome, Mr. Bernie Taylor. Bernie, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, man. Anytime you want to come on.
As everybody should know, Brian and I were supposed to be back-to-back on the same show together and synchrony and do some dialogue. He has a great book, Losing Nobel. I really appreciate his work, the effort he put into it. And we're going to pick up on some of those themes from a different perspective as we go forward today.
And I think I figured out what the echo problem was. So I think you should... Are you hearing echo on my side?
Sort of.
Okay. Well, I'm not getting the clipping that I was before on the lines, so I haven't actually used this mixer for about a year and a half. And it's kind of like going, like when you move back into your parents' house, or you go to visit, and you see your old room, and nothing's changed, but you don't remember where anything is, but you do.
Well, you sort of have a higher pitch version of Darth Vader at the moment. I'm okay with it.
Well, I will attempt to not invite people over to the dark side, but I hope that everyone does enjoy the presentation, because I know that you have mentioned the cosmic egg, and I think we kind of mentioned it on the show. Brian's very good at explaining things. Obviously, as a professor, you have to be, or he probably wouldn't have been able to get to the level he is at. I can understand the core concepts. You know the beginning and where it came from, which is why I wanted to be able to talk to you about it, because it's, well, interesting as hell to me. Why don't you kind of roll us into it, and we can take things, get things going, take things off.
Absolutely, Brian's brilliant. So this is a tough act to follow. We're gonna jump into the cosmic egg as a singularity, and the Big Bang. We talk about the Big Bang, which everything came from something, and there's that striking of the match of what Bryan was seeking to explore. But from before we had science as we know it today, we've had that singularity, that big explosion, and we call it the cosmic egg. And people around the world have this myth of singularity. And the Dogon of Africa, the people of the Cirrus B, the Norse people, the Vedic people who are in now India, the Orphic Greek, the Chinese, the Egyptians. And the Chinese, this is an image from ancient Chinese, that's Pengu. And Pengu breaks through from the cosmic egg to create order. And you can see kind of the yin and yang in that image. And that is the origin of the Chinese yin and yang. So it's a universal myth, but it's also a universal image. And this is, I would suggest that this is one of the earliest cosmic eggs. In South Africa, there are ostrich shells dating to about 60,000 years ago. There's a few things unique about these ostrich shells. One is they have some of the oldest patterns that humans have made. And these patterns are decorated shells, 25 shells. They were broken and then they were thrown into the flames. And that's why we have the different discoloration on the same shells. So it's possible that this could have been because one of the symbols for that original cosmic egg. You had me on the show a few months ago, and we had this masked man here, this masked cosmic man. And in his right hand, he holds the cosmic egg. And his left hand is against the wall. And the mask is of an eagle on one side, and the eye of a man on the other. You can see his chin. His left leg is raised, and that left hand that's against the wall has the appearance of a feathered bird, which is quite interesting. And we're going to go forwards. So we're going to jump forwards now to the origin of the Big Bang. Well, it started as the hypothesis of the primeval atom, and Bryan talks about that a little in his book, by the Belgian priest Father Georges Lemaitre. Lemaitre was a pure physicist, and mathematician / physicist, and astronomer. He, of course, was a devout Catholic, but he didn't seek to prove religion through science. And he came out with the idea of this primeval atom, which is later called the Big Bang. And you can see him here across with Einstein. And Einstein said that his math is incredible, but his physics are atrocious. And Pope Pius XII came out with this at the same time as the primeval atom. And he said, this is now proof that there's a creation, therefore there must be a creator. And Lemaitre came out against that and said, I'm not trying to prove a creator, and he's trying to distance himself from the Pope. I'm trying to take us forward in science, it's just fascinating. People, mope and groan about the story of Galileo and the Pope and all this sort of stuff. Lemaitre made up for it in spades because he created this modern idea of the cosmic egg. Of the Big Bang. However, this Big Bang that he came up with, the idea itself came from the cosmic egg. So it goes back to that eternal question: what happened first, the chicken or the egg? That's what we're asking. Was there something before the Big Bang? And in the so-called in the approach that Bryan's taken, of course, and Lemaitre, is that there was a singularity that everything came from. But that's the same question that we have. Was the chicken in the egg, or is the egg in the chicken? And so when people from our distant past and ancients, when they sought to resolve this question of the chicken and the egg, they also took that to what came first, man or the universe? Or could there be a universe if we don't perceive it, or a universe for us at least? The answer is, of course, there can be a universe without us. But they asked these questions. And we have this man, he rides the horse. We saw that one earlier. We're going to jump through some of these slides, the transformation. Again, we have this man with the cosmic egg. In one arm, his front right arm, he holds the egg. In the back rear arm, he has that is feathered. And if we go back to the cosmic man, which we saw earlier, the same feathered rear left hand is feathered, which is against the wall. And he holds the egg in his right hand, but it's a different right hand than we just saw this man of the transformation. So we'll take a look back at that. So we have a story of a man who's carrying the egg, or this cosmic egg. And we're going to jump down here to another one. And well, on the same panel we have a great auk. A great auk is a now extinct, flightless bird, something like a penguin, but it's not a penguin. And it's the only bird, or other than the man who becomes the eagle and also an eagle itself, he's the only bird on this panel. And the size of the man who's holding the cosmic egg in his right hand, if you look at fundamentally the size of his hand is about 5 inches. Well, the egg of the great auk was also about 5 inches. So there's a commonality between the two. This great auk has a cosmological significance as well, which we're gonna get onto. We'll just run through some of these slides so we can get in perspective. We have the dolphin, spinning dolphin. We have the therianthrope, was that man which we saw earlier with the cosmic egg. He picks up the tail of the dolphin. We have the monk seal, Mediterranean monk seal. We have the swimmer going across the panel. We have the red-haired man at one end, which is the southern end, and the horse we saw earlier was on the northern end of the panel. And if anybody's catching, we did these slides in the presentation a few months ago. People can go back to review them and see where we were, but it was over an hour long. And we have the man, he's being lifted by the dolphin, really cool image, reminiscent of something you might see in cartoons today or SeaWorld. There's the giraffe on the southern end of the panel. We have the Barbary ape, fascinating image. We have the lions, and we actually have the lioness looking up to the lion. We have the bears, the mother and her 2 cubs. We have the reptile, the lizard. We have the woman with a distressed face or appearance. Now let's jump to that big slide, that slide we showed earlier. This one's important, and this ties back into our concept of the Big Bang and the cosmic egg and so forth. At the top of the panel, we have that man with the mask. He's A, and he's Hercules. B is Aegea, the eagle. C is Lacerta, the lizard. D is Pegasus, the horse. E is Pisces, which became the dolphin. F is Cetus, which the ancient Greeks saw as a sea monster, but we see it now as we see as a seal, or the Paleolithic record they showed a seal. G is Perseus, which is the body of the elephant, which we showed in the previous presentation. H is Aruga, which is the head of the elephant, and I is the trunk, which becomes Taurus. J is the lynx, which also could be another trunk of the elephant. K is Ursa Major. L is Leo, the lion. M is Gemini, which is either the lioness that's licking up to the lion, or the Barbary ape, or Barbary ape. And N is Orion at the bottom of the panel. And we go from north to south on this. And so it's a fascinating image, and it tells us a lot about past, that the earth and sky are one, as in the Hermetic tradition. And you've probably have Hermetic people, esoterics on the show, and they've talked about this concept of the reflection. But we can see now where it comes from. There's a few other slides in there as well. Aquarius is at therianthrope. It's in the same place on the panel. And Cygnus. So the auk is Cygnus. He's in the right place in the panel. The reptile is just below him. Hercules is above him, and Pegasus is to his right. So we have all the characters as the Greeks saw them, except the bird isn't a swan or a goose. It's a great auk, which laid the cosmic egg. And this is a slide we didn't have in the last one. Is the constellations as we know them today are most of the characters in the constellations came from Ptolemy about 1800 years ago, and he's considered to be the greatest astronomer of antiquity. And a few of the commonalities that he had between the Paleolithic record and the constellations he made was that the constellations overlapped each other, and that they're imaginary pictures without borders, which is not how we do today, because in modern astronomy we've created boundaries. And the constellations that are in the Paleolithic record that are common with what Ptolemy found were Aquarius, Aegea, Capricornus, which we don't have in this presentation, Cetus, Cygnus, Gemini, Hercules, Leo, Orion, Pegasus, Pisces, and Ursa Major. And that's so Ptolemy had a source that didn't come from his sight alone, but he had looked into some record, whether it be this cave, another cave, or perhaps someone else had written it down somewhere. And astronomers, I'm sort of a reluctant astronomer, but there was a book titled The Crime of Claudius Ptolemy, written by Robert Newton, unrelated to Isaac Newton. And Newton said that Ptolemy is not the greatest astronomer of antiquity, but he is something still more unusual. He is the most successful fraud in the history of science. And how Newton came to that conclusion was that Ptolemy could see constellations, or he recorded constellations that he couldn't see with his own eyes, that they were further south. So Ptolemy must have had a record, they suggested, or astronomers suggest, from a different place. But I would suggest that it wasn't a different place per se, it was a different time. It was a different time in the Paleolithic record. And there were other people that had somehow dived into it. One of them was Johannes Helvius, the Polish astronomer. And he had 7 new northern constellations. In there he has Lacerta, the lizard. He has Leo Minor. And my suggestion is he didn't see this, but he had a myth, because Leo Minor would be the lioness who's on the other side of Leo from the Greek perspective. So in this Paleolithic perspective, in the Paleolithic perspective, we have this lioness looking up to the lion. But in Johannes's interpretation, Leo Minor is on the other side of the lion. And of course, we have the lynx.
Would you be able to move the Skype pop-up off screen if possible? The one that's currently blocking Johannes's.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
So that's Johannes. So my suggestion is that Johannes hadn't visited the cave and he hadn't seen this, but he had some sort of a record, whether it be in myth or a globe or something, that people had recorded this from an earlier time, and not in this presentation, but there's dogs and foxes and other animals in there, and so people were not they were reinventing things from the past. And how does this tie into the Big Bang? Okay, so we have in these constellations we have these archetypal characters. We have the lion that sits at the top. We have the hero, which is the man who's being lifted by the bottlenose dolphin. We have the Hercules character wearing the mask that transforms himself. Well, the Big Bang goes back to, this concept of the cosmic egg goes back to a deep time. And the cosmic egg is an archetypal character, just as these animal characters, or the teacher and the apprentice, and the cosmic mountain, or the river of transformation. So whether or not, I can't say that there is a Big Bang or the many other theories of the cosmos, but what I can say is that we came to the conclusion to go down the road of the Big Bang because of these archetypal characters that are deep within us, and we can't escape them. And we're comfortable with this idea of the Big Bang because it ties into things that we recognize from a deeper time, a deep period. And we go to the next slide. We didn't do this in the previous presentation, but we have the Orion character who's being lifted by the bottlenose dolphin. And that was timed to 34,000 years ago, that image that we just had with showing the Paleolithic record versus the astronomy. Well, we can look if this is actually possible. And down at the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula during that time period, the highest that Orion was above the horizon, we can compare. So the other image we showed was 32,000 BCE. So that was 34,000 years ago. We can go deeper in time to 34,000, and we can still see Orion above the horizon. And then we go deeper at 36, we can't see him at its highest point, and 38 we can't see it. And so it's either between the 32 and the 34, or sometime after the 40,000. And the dating of the gallery of disks was through some of those red disks, and they came up with about 34,000 years ago. So the astronomical record matches the chemical dating of the image itself. So we can test this image through precession. And this is from the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula. And I don't believe that's ever been done before. We build computer models to go back in time. And the ancient Greeks hypothesized that there is precession based on points that were in a record from a not so distant time. But to actually test something this far back in time is absolutely amazing. And of course, the program comes from Starry Night Pro 7, which is generated by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory people. And that idea of precession is that the world spins around like a top on a 25,700 year cycle, and what we see below the horizon today will be different than it was seen 10,000 years ago. So our view of the stars shifts, and that's why Orion, from the perspective of the southern tip of the Strait of Gibraltar, he appears to go up and down. It has to do with this wobbling of the Earth. And,
so did you say shifts, or it's the shifts?
Shift.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
He appears to shift.
I'm on a RCA connection, so it's not as clear as it should be. So I have to make sure. That's
right. And this of course goes back to the work of Joseph Campbell and the mythology and so on. We're not going to do that again. And in the earlier presentation that I had done, we talked about myths being passed through the seasons of the night skies, constellations and stars, projecting man's psyche into the cosmos. These characters that are light years from Earth, but still within the grasp of the human imagination. We're telling the same story. And what I appreciate about Bryan's book was that he's telling a story of struggle. He's telling a story of jealousy and peer rivalry, and everybody striving for the goal, the goal itself. And in the end, it all falls apart. And Bryan emerges to recognize that it's not about the prize itself, but rather the journey of what he learned on the way. And his book itself is sharing his hero's journey of his experiences and his life story, which was not just his professional life, but his family life as well. And I really appreciate how he tied all those together. And this, we talk going back to the Big Bang and this great auk. And so is it really the chicken and the egg, or is it the great auk or the egg that came first? And then a more important concept is that, is this myth of the cosmic egg one of a singularity in creation or of yearly renewal? The great auk laid its egg late May, early June, which ties into the biology of the other animals on the panel at the same time period, or actually just predates them by a few weeks. My suggestion is that the panel is a story of it's a cycle of the year, as the constellations travel through the year and tell this story, and that at each point in the journey of the hero, when he swims across the Strait of Gibraltar and he's raised by the dolphins and he's assisted by these animal beings, he's accounted them on the earth and in the sky, and that the story's told every year in the same way. Just like Christmas, we watch The Little Drummer Boy and other similar types of programs that we don't watch in July. And my sense is that this great auk was a character that they recognized in early June as dropping the cosmic egg. And so that even though Lemanter brought the cosmic egg to create his hypothesis, which we now call the Big Bang, the myth before the myth was really of yearly renewal, in the same way that we have Easter eggs rather than a cosmic egg in itself. And that later the ancients, whether it be the Chinese, the Vedics, the Dogon, and so forth, they changed the story to make it an actual singular start of time, when the Paleolithic version was a yearly cycle that would give the impression that everything was created at one time, but in fact, it's a yearly cycle of the constellations, which is kind of a slight twist to the cosmic egg story.
I mentioned this in the interview with Bryan, that I'm, cosmic egg, I'm kind of a proponent of the whole, we were kind of like shit out by a fourth dimension, and we are a three-dimensional hologram in a three-dimensional black hole, or a four-dimensional black hole, as Leonard Susskind, or at least he theorizes that the idea of 3D information being converted from voxels to pixels in a black hole, the information is still there, but the overall mass is kind of gone. So, same concept. I could be way off, but that's kind of the same thing, I think, to a certain extent.
Well, that's an interesting idea. I believe that there are very few new ideas, and Bryan's a devout Jew, and I believe this ties back into his as well. Ecclesiastes is credited, of course, to Solomon, and what has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun, and we can build microchips and spaceships and all these things, which are new in our time. But the foundations of the basic knowledge of what we think and what we believe and what we feel, I believe they go back for a very long time, that they're in our psyche and in these archetypal characters. And to break away from the archetypal characters is so difficult to do. It's amazing that the cosmic, or the Big Bang, was taken on so quickly. When it first was when Lemanter came out with it, people just thought it was nuts, and they just said, "Well, it's just the Catholics trying to repitch creationism." And the so-called scientists at the time said, "No, no, no, no." Well, they said, "No, we're not going to deal with this thing," and only to later that they adopted, partly when Einstein jumped on board. But Hubble also observed the expansion of the universe through the telescope, which validated the mathematical equations that Lemanter had come up with. So it goes back to your point, was, can we really theoretically create something new? Or are we still tied to these archetypes in the past that are still within us? And I don't think we can change.
Well, essentially, like, all we're doing is just regurgitating the same information in different ways or in different sayings. Like, if I say fourth dimensional, whatever, you say cosmic egg. biological entity growing off of a grapevine versus apple. Same, or orange. I would say that would probably be the best metaphor. Who knows? What John Ward said it best, and I've said it a couple of times, and it actually is kind of a good saying. We don't know, we weren't there. And if we were, we probably would have been blown to bits. Or
correct.
The smallest bits humanly imaginable. The closest we can get is like moments before the Big Bang, and obviously if new imaging techniques are successful, we may get a closer idea of exactly what the heck, where we come from. And you'll have religious people that will state, okay, well, it's definitely the work of God. You'll have scientists who are hard science, who believe in hard science, who will state, no, it's this is something that was born of physics, or it came from a singularity. Like at the end of the day, we're trying to define something that's so much larger and so much older than us that we can't conceive it beyond a few ideas and concepts and metaphors. Like we can build those microchips and those spaceships. At the end of the day, we're a species that's dumb as shit. Like collectively, the most powerful country on the planet elected a guy who this morning went on a TV show and got his lawyer into trouble and probably got himself into legal trouble, and he's running the free world. Like this is the reality we live in, and yet we can do all these great wonders, and yet we're trying to be able to define what creation is. And the most we can get to is an abstract idea. That's the most we can really hope for until we can actually get certifiable, quantifiable proof of what it is. And the idea of trying to recreate the wheel, as it were, or nothing is ever new. No, it's just different iterations ad infinitum, and that's what the universe is. It's constantly multiplying or constantly growing, and some of it can look the same, some of it can be really fucking weird. And how do we know that one, both, or none of the explanations that have been provided to date are true? We don't.
Correct. Well, because what they're we can't say that they're the truth of what happened back then. We can say that the truth to ourselves. We're all seeking answers to where we came from. That's what the search for the explanation, the story, the myth of the cosmic egg is, as well as the search to find the Big Bang. It's where do we come from? And what are we doing here? And then where do we go from here? And I believe that that's where the lines of spirituality and science cross. Although people on both sides might not agree with that, but it really is. Someone asked me recently, of all this work we do and all these ideas that we have and all these things that we move forward, and looking back into the Paleolithic record, we now see that we haven't really changed that much. In fact, we've borrowed the myths from cavemen 34,000 years ago via the Greeks and Egyptians and others. And this is how kind of a metaphor, as I can see it, is that all this, everything that happens is a stream, and all these archetypes and these metaphors and these myths are just being carried by the stream, and they determine who we are. And you and I, we can have this fascinating discussion as well with Bryan, and in the end, we're just putting our hand in the stream for a moment. And maybe we can throw a few rocks and dam it up, and we can hold back the flow. But in the end, the flow is going to carry through. And all this information from the past will continue on. The information that we have today will someday be buried in the sands or destroyed in an earthquake or some sort of cosmic explosion. And that we really can't change the flow of the stream. We can only put our hands in for a moment and watch it go around us. But it's timeless. And I believe that I really appreciate the work of Bryan and his colleagues and the book that he wrote, that he's going deeper to explore questions that most of us don't have the capacity to even consider. And he's thinking of novel ways to prove his theories. And it's it's great to have people like Bryan in our presence and to connect with them.
I'm appreciative of his patience. You can tell he's had a few kids, and it's like, okay, he's been there, he's done that, he's taken his lumps, and he understands what adversity is, and he's willing to be able to face that adversity to try and find as close to the truth as possible, or at least the truth to him. And I've got my truth, and at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, well, that was 12 some billion years ago. I'm not really going to worry about it too much, but at the same time, it's cool to know. What about you? Are you a proponent of the cosmic egg? Do you think we were, eaten by a dragon? What's your metaphor? What's your truth?
So I don't think we're eaten by a dragon, and there's a number of different cosmic egg stories, and they finally have the same truth, and not just myths, but artifacts around the world. So I believe that they're all truths in them, and that there is an element of truth in all the myths. That we're seeking to understand our existence, where we came from, where we go. And I was listening to a podcast the other day from a skeptic atheist, and he was, deciding, should he believe in an afterlife or not? And he says, of course we want to do the best we are in this world, that we're not gambling or hedging out bets for something in the future. And maybe that's a reason itself not to believe in an afterlife. However, but let's look at it from another perspective. Whether you believe that at the moment of your death, your synapses are going for 10 seconds or eternity, because it really is the same thing for you. What is the last thing that you want to see? Because the last thing that goes through your mind, because that last thing that goes through your mind is your eternity, whether it's 10 seconds or some time we can't even imagine. And so where do you see, Chris? What do you want to see in that last second? What is that final thought that you want, that you're going to carry to eternity with you?
My wife's warm, bountiful bosom. I love her to death, and call me old-fashioned. Being held by her is probably the most calming and reassuring thing that you can have. Mm-hmm. Whether you're at the end of a long day, you just give your partner a hug, and that's like, to me, that's truth. That's more of an emotion. That's still that abstract idea. But for me, it's that idea of peace, feeling at home, feeling that that constant reassurance of belonging, and not even the fact that you belong somewhere, just that you know where you belong. Like that.
That's your heaven.
Pretty well, yeah.
And that can be the heaven of. So my heaven is fairly similar to yours, but of course it's not your wife. And
I sure as hell hope not.
but it's really the warmth of family. That's really what it comes down to being surrounded by family. And whether or not that is, for 10 seconds, for an eternity, it's the same thing. It is what your final moments are, and how we carry them forward. And that's so you've had Bryan's program, and his book was, of course, Losing the Nobel, and mine is Before Orion, Finding the Face of the Hero. And we take many of the same journey, beforeorion.com, Instagram, Facebook, Before Orion, Twitter, Bernie Taylor OR, YouTube, beforeorion.com, and I use hashtag Before Orion in just about everything. And so people can connect with those. So I'm now, I've got you. I can't see you. If I hit stop
share screen,
sharing,
you'll be able to see me. Yes.
Well, I see the Denner logo, but that's okay too.
I'm seeing the reflection of the light on the wall through the curtain here. I've got.
Oh, do you?
Well, with the preparation that we had, I should say I had, trying to get on the air where we'd actually have sound, for actual sound. There's a lot of wires back there now that I got to clean up.
No,
So,
it's okay. It's a building process. Your journey to become a podcaster without a separate person running the controls is pretty amazing. You're becoming more techy. And one of your strengths as a podcaster is actually your graphic design. No one has better graphic design out there than you. And we all appreciate the image that you portray of us.
well, I just try and say, okay, well, what looks cool? What's going to get people's attention? What is going to inspire individuals? And especially the viewers at home, like they know how hard it is to do this. Some people they'll have, like, Joe Rogan's got Jamie, who, he's a wizard. He, like, during shows, he will upload video, the clips of the show, the Joe Rogan Experience clips, as the show's going on. So you will get clips from the beginning of the show for 10, 15 minutes. Like, this is a cool part, while the show's, in its second or third hour. Being able to do that while also do research, while chatting, while doing, holding a full conversation with somebody and trying to make sure that it's engaging. Mm-hmm. Oh, man. If anybody lives in Ottawa looking for an intern, Lee, or when Lee gets his monitors, we'll finally get some, get cracking. But for anybody who's at home, new mics, new preamp, new noise gate, which means getting audio episodes up faster, better mastering, on-the-fly mastering as quickly as I can figure out exactly what the heck went wrong. But it's, like if you're running an experiment, and things don't turn out the way that you expected, even though the tests ran 100% right, and then on the actual live, on the test that it's supposed to be a demonstration to your peers, everything goes right to shit. Like, I know scientists who, my sister has probably had stuff like that happen. She's a chemist, or was a chemist. She knows scientists who have had the exact same thing happen. With them, it was obviously, hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer and research grants that were kind of blown, but the idea is to be able to overcome that adversity. It's the same message that Bryan is trying to communicate, and through his book and through his lessons, he's trying to change the world and change the world for better, just like you're trying to change the world for better by showing a more positive aspect or archetype. And I know that, like, we've talked about that on the last show. I talked about that with Laura, who I know was a friend of yours, and if anything that we talk about usually always leads back to Jung.
Yeah,
Go figure.
Yeah, it kind of does. And yes, there are geniuses among us that are far beyond what we could imagine, or geniuses that have been. And I believe that these Paleolithic artists were phenomenal geniuses, and we and as people like Jung as well.
Well, you have individuals who understood the aspects of the psyche, and I didn't understand the concepts as well then as I do now. Mm-hmm. But essentially, what I basically figured out from our entire talk, as well as from the many talks that I had with Laura Laura London over social media, it's the understanding of the different aspects of the psyche of each individual, and understanding that there's good in us, there's bad in us, and to be able to recognize that, so you can actually be that, you can add something positive to the world, to the human experience, and not just take away from it.
Exactly. And that is a good summary of things. And this is a great show, Chris. I'm looking forward to the edited version that you splice it all together and put it out there to the world.
So wait until I add, like, the video effects and the flames behind me, because I'm wearing the Freemason T-shirt, so you got a deep state, gotta represent.
I'm with you.
Oh, my Bernie Taylor Illuminati confirmed, ladies and gentlemen. Next week on the show, I actually, while we were getting this show, our guest for next week, he's a friend of mine, he's a client of mine, he's probably one of the most positive influences in my life. He helped me quit smoking, and I've been a 20-year smoker. And I just found out his partner has well, is battling an illness, and next week, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to find a new guest. So I don't know what you're doing on Friday, but if you want to come in and talk some philosophy in a round table, we might be able to put that together.
This Friday.
Well, not tomorrow. Like next week.
Next week, Friday, I will be in a very tropical place.
You lucky son of a gun. No, trust me. I would never take that away from anybody for the world. Enjoy yourself.
I'm going to give a presentation on astronomy.
In somewhere warm, in the middle of it's in spring. You're on the West Coast, so you don't get the same winters we had. We just reached above 2 digits for the first time this week in like 6 months. So
wow.
Go enjoy yourself. But for anybody who's out there, I'm going to be releasing the new lineup soon. Probably within the next couple of days, it'll be on Patreon. And I'm going to hopefully have a new video uploaded for tomorrow. I've got some work I got to get done tonight and tomorrow. But definitely by the weekend, ladies and gents. And Bernie, it's always a pleasure. You've been a big friend of the show. You've helped me learn a lot about myself with our talks. And I got to say thank you very much for inviting me and introducing me to Bryan. And for your support. We wouldn't be able to exist without fans like yourself, who also like to learn cool shit and teach cool shit.
Thank you for having me on again.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much, ladies and gents. Have yourself a good night, and until next week, keep your glasses charged and your whiskey